Hey, we usher right now. We usher today for this review. Nah, not really, but we're close. Hey everyone, CW Music here. I'm CDD, and this is going to be a review of this new Jeff Rosenstock album, Post-Subtract. Post, let's just call it Post, that's easier. Presumably he didn't want to copy the Bjork album of the same name. Or maybe not. I don't know. This is the latest full-length album from punk rocker, pop rocker, punk rock, pop punk, power pop guy, frontman guy, person, individual, Jeff Rosenstock. He's been around for quite a while now. He was known for this band called Bomb the Music Industry. Not something I'm telling anybody to do, that's the literal name of the band. That band broke up, and now he has his own solo career going on. As of with his debut album, We Cool. Really good album. Along with the album he dropped right after that, Worry, which is my favorite of the two. Worry was an album that made a lot of sense around the time it was being released. Sort of a midlife crisis sort of album. An album that kind of delves in existentialism, social themes, etc., etc., etc. But what I liked about the album was that on one side you had solidly written pop rock and punk rock songs that definitely can stand on their own 2 feet. And on the other end you had this one interesting suite of songs that are visceral and energetic and all over the place. That kind of reminds me of like punk's answer to what Beatles did with Abbey Road, and that just led to one of the most satisfying punk albums that have come out in a while. So after the release of this album, I was pretty excited as to what Jeff Rosenstock will be doing right after Worry, especially since he is on a winning streak when it comes to writing anthemic and just overall visceral and emotional punk rock tunes that I end up enjoying a lot. And he just has a sort of charisma about him that definitely is pretty inspiring and pretty interesting for sure. So this album dropped literally on the day of New Year's with like no singles leading up to it, no promotion or anything, just oh, there's an album. The album itself was recorded throughout much of 2017, and a good chunk of the songs were written following the election of the current president, Donald Trump, which makes a lot of sense when you give a gander to these lyrics. So I was pretty excited to listen to this thing for sure. I wasn't sure what to expect from it, considering the fact that Rosenstock seems to be kind of evolving with his unique sound in punk music, even if he's not necessarily doing anything unique or new in terms of punk music, but still refreshing, still energetic and inspiring. So the question is, did this album end up doing the thing that I would have liked for him to do? The answer to that question, yes, he definitely does this particularly well. It's just that a good portion of the album gives me a little bit of deja vu in terms of it sounding relatively similar to Worry a good portion of the time, but still leading up to a very satisfying release. This album's not going to really drag you down in terms of like patience driving, since it's 40 minutes long, about 10 tracks. A bulk of the album's lengths come from the second track and the closing track. The second track is about 7.5 minutes, and the closing track is a little over 11 minutes. But a good portion of the time you're getting standard length tracks, you're getting 3-minute songs, 4-minute songs. The shortest track on the album is about 1 minute and 40 seconds in length. The production on this album is pretty good. It's not too different from what Worry was. Definitely a lot of crunchiness to the riffs. The drums sound pretty clear. The bass definitely has quite a bit of presence to it. Jeff's vocals are one with the chaos and the viscera a good portion of the time. There's actually also quite a bit of synth that's worked in pretty well. I do like how it's colorful along with the rest of the album. I dare say the performances are a lot more vibrant than what was on Worry, which is pretty fantastic. Tracks like Powerlessness, USA, Your Throat, and All This Useless Energy definitely have a lot of oomph to them. They definitely have a lot of teeth. There's also simultaneously also ballad tracks like TV Stars, especially, along with 9 out of 10. However, to circle back from what I initially complained about at the beginning of this review with this album, is how much it sounds a lot like Worry a good portion of the time. Tracks like Melba, Beating My Head Against the Wall, Powerlessness in particular, they definitely sound like B-sides to what would have been on Worry, or just leftovers that somehow have turned up here. And again, the themes and the overall musical concept and compositions aren't that different from Worry. So if you're a huge fan of what Jeff Rosenstock did on the album Worry, you're going to be a huge fan of what he does here. Personally though, I really wanted something a lot more unique than what Jeff did on the album Worry. I was hoping that it'll be a lot more distinct than what it is he did on that album with this album. However, there are definitely moments that show me that Jeff is onto something here, especially with the track USA. Holy crap, this was one hell of an opener. This opening few lines is a tone setter right here. Dumbfounded, downtrodden, and dejected, crestfallen, grief-stricken, and exhausted, trapped in a room while the house was burning to the motherfucking ground. If that doesn't perk your ears up when you first put this album on, I don't know what will. The track itself is pretty progressive in its sort of songwriting. It's hard-hitting. The riffs are definitely distorted and just layered really well. I do like the way the track progresses. There's an instrumental break in the middle that kind of goes into a more downtrodden, sort of spacey synth drone thing before it like picks back up and definitely climaxes incredibly well. It's this kind of songwriting that I was hoping that the rest of the album would do, but unfortunately it's more standard than, say, this track as well as the closing track, Let Them Win, which is my favorite track on the record. Especially the way this track definitely presents itself with like these sort of start-stop crunchy riffage, and Jeff being particularly passionate about the fact that, yeah, these powers that be are going to do all sorts of horrible things, but at the end of the day, we're not going to let them succeed in destroying everybody and destroying the country itself. The track actually ends after kind of fizzling out and turns into this synth ambient thing. That kind of reminds me of what Father John Misty did on his album Pure Comedy, specifically the track So I'm Growing Old on Magic Mountain. But I definitely think that it's worked particularly well, and it doesn't really feel like it's wasted time. Other than that, there's not really a whole lot to say in terms of the musical composition of the rest of the album. If you've heard Worry, you've kind of heard what these tracks have to offer. But there's definitely highlights in the middle for sure. The track 9 out of 10, genius placement by the way, being the 9th track out of 10 tracks here. Definitely is one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful ballad the album has to offer. Sort of synth driven for the most part. I do like how the synth is worked on this track. Tracks like Your Throat and Powerlessness have very fast-paced and incredibly catchy hooks, especially Your Throat. When it gets stuck inside your throat, when it gets stuck inside your throat. The track TV Stars is also a beautiful ballad. It's definitely more on the crunchier side, but I do dig it a lot. I think my least favorite track would have to be Beating My Head Against a Wall. I do like how the track Melba glides seamlessly into this track, but there's not really a whole lot that the instrumental offers. It pretty much gives you all of what it's going to do within the course of the less than 2 minutes it runs, and it just doesn't feel like a good placement for the album. I feel like that this track would have been better fit for the latter half of Worry. The thing about that is, even though the album itself gives me a lot of deja vu with the album Worry, even though I feel like that the album isn't too distinct from the previous album, I still feel like that this is solid, and I still feel like that this is a good album. there's not necessarily anything wrong with the instrumentals per se. I just feel like that Jeff needs to either demonstrate more conceptuality or he needs to experiment instrumentally with the next album. I do commend Jeff for putting out an album that is reflective of the post-election, considering the fact that the album is called Post. I feel like that the title definitely summarizes a lot of thoughts he's having, a lot of things that are just now post this that I definitely commend with this album. I do feel like that the songwriting here is great in terms of lyricism. I do feel like that the instrumentals are also really good. And I do definitely recommend this if you like punk music, if you like power pop music. Fortunately though, it's not necessarily going to be like a top 10 by the end of the year. I don't really foresee that happening. I'm hoping with the next album, Jeff definitely kind of searches himself for a lot more creativity. I do feel like that he can definitely come through with an album that is going to be furthering himself as one of the most interesting figures in punk music. This album definitely does that, but in terms of remaining consistent, then actually keeping up with putting out interesting music. Regardless though, this is a dope album. I definitely like this album a lot, and it's going to be a highlight by the end of the year for sure. This album is a plus 2.2 out of plus 3. It started out strong and it ended strong. It's just the middle that reminded me a little too much of Worry. But if you give this album a listen, what'd you think of it? Did you like this album? Did you dislike this album? What was your reasoning for that? And what you consider listening to and reviewing next? CW Music here, signing off.